One of the things you often want to do with visual scripting is to try to hide complexity. So this is something that's being worked on with Unreal and with MetaSounds, and they're going to start making more interfaces and more library objects to encapsulate the complexity of things. So you don't have to necessarily rebuild like your own random container all the time. You'll actually have a nice graphic interface for that. Or if you're going to do certain basic types of adaptive or interactive music, then you'll also have like, pre-built chunks for that you can use. So at the top level, you have the interface. This is showing Reactor, and you've got, like the laser base. There's like nice graphics and nodes and knobs and, sliders, all that kind of stuff. Nice graphics. It's nicely laid out. It makes you want to use it, okay? And then sort of the layer below that is sort of like light scripting. So we can see that that's using like libraries and high-level scripting. And that would be something like I showed you on automatism. Sorry, like I showed you with plug data, like with the guitar. And that's where you can just plop in larger modules. Then you can get more detailed with low-level scripting. And that's like where you're using atomic, like, sort of the more basic objects like the DAC and stuff like that. And then what you can also do is if you're a programmer is that you can program C or C++ code, optimize it, and make your own nodes. And within Unreal, this isn't too difficult. Um, then below that, there's also the hardware sound driver too. So that's written in C and C++. Okay, sometimes in assembly, I guess. So what I've been talking about earlier is this idea of visual scripting libraries. And so the neat thing there is that you can organize commonly used functions and then reuse them and share them. And so you can, one of the things that Native Instruments has done with Reactor is taken user patches, and the ones that are the best, they actually put those into being official patches, and then those ones get supported because often people will make a patch and that's fun, but who wants to support it over all sorts of different, like, changes over different versions, when the user interface changes or whatever, like maybe the core objects change, it needs to be remade. Like I had to do that when I was working with Unreal Engine 5.1, and I made a bunch of stuff in MetaSounds, and then MetaSounds totally changed into the current version of 5.4.2. I guess that'll somewhat date this video, but anyways, um, yeah, and that process of maintenance is actually super important. And it would be nice to have an ease of use similar to GitHub. So GitHub is just a way of, putting open source code up and having people see it, download it, and easily recompile it for their own use and to be able to learn from it. So there's the snippet repository, as I show on the right-hand side here. And then if you use commercial solutions like Sugi Studio GameSamp, they have a whole library of all these procedural audio sounds, and there's going to be a presentation on that in AirCon as well that you should definitely check out. Another place that you can get patches from for Pure Data and other visual scripting systems is on patch storage. So yes, that is super important because like similar to GitHub, like there's no reason to like reinvent the wheel. Oftentimes it's just better to reuse existing code bases. So what are the advantages of using visual scripting? So the things that I really like you can see there, and this is, Unity visual scripting, is that it's just, I like to think visually. I'm a visual thinker. And so that means that non-coders, I think, a lot of the times there's more of an in for them to implement behaviors and actually have more control over their interactive audio systems than they would normally have. It allows for real-time coding and changing things interactively. It's kind of like jamming with the system, like I showed you with when I was making that little patch, like in plug data. And as you change things, you hear the result immediately. You don't have to hit compile, right? And you can hide the complexity into layers. So like similar to Reactor and other systems, and even with PD, you can use this thing called Graph on Parent that allows you to make a nice interface and hide all the details. So it's like the front panel of the synthesizer, and you don't have to look at all the soldering and wires and stuff underneath there. One of the things that I've really liked about using PD is that I can load in patches that I did like 20 years ago and they still work, right? Another advantage is that syntax errors are less problematic. So like if you hit like, a semicolon like in the wrong spot or something like that, you're not going to be like super penalized for it, when using PD. And also even with meta sounds, you can just sort of jam stuff into each other. And, over time, UE5 has done really well with showing really good errors and being able to quickly figure things out, even when you do have an issue with visual scripting. And yes, when open source allows you to learn from others, I've learned a lot from Martin Brinkman, and to collaborate as well. So some of the challenges are, yes, look at that patch. Like, yeah, that's a Metasound patch that I made, and it's fairly basic, but you can see that I should modularize that and break it into chunks. So it can be like a mess of like, visual spaghetti, and it is code. Like you need to figure out how to use like, principles like reuse and encapsulation and other, actual computer science kind of approaches or techniques over time. But at the beginning, I think it's still fine to just like throw stuff together and see what works. And then also you can see that there's so many little wires here, similar to like doing a lot of soldering. You sort of can kind of like, get your, this is something that I've talked about with other people that do a lot of PD, is that moving the mouse around, you can get sort of RSI-ish, like hurt your hand basically by all this patching. And also visual scripting tends to be slower than using C or a compiled language. Another thing is that, yes, you have an advantage of the artists being sound artists, being able to add stuff, but then they can also break the code. So sometimes, especially with larger projects, it's good to have like a coder or a technical audio artist like look at the patches, and they're the people that make sure that it doesn't actually cause like really big problems with the game. Another thing that I found, although you can do this in Unreal, is that you can diff, like say blueprints, is that in general it's kind of hard because it just is not it's not kind of structured the same way as say like a C code or C++ code is. And once again, yeah, no GitHub for visual scripting yet, unfortunately.